Omega Dockyard was little more than a metal skeleton drifting against the velvet backdrop of space. It had once been a thriving hub for all kinds of travelers, cargo haulers, mercenaries, and the occasional luxury cruiser stopping for repairs. But now it survived on the fringes. The station's docking bays were old and cramped, the corridors narrow and tinged with stale air, and its residents were predominantly those who had nowhere else to go. On a typical day, only a smattering of incoming ships would request mooring. Some needed emergency maintenance. Some needed cheaper repairs than the big corporate facilities offered. Most simply ended up at Omega Dockyard because every other place had turned them away. Brick Harding fit right into this environment, though it was never his plan to spend years out here. He was a mechanic by trade, a skilled one at that, originally from Earth. Before life had thrown him onto Omega, he had worked in a variety of small-scale engineering shops across the inhabited corners of the galaxy. But each time, corporate expansion or resource shortages forced him to move on. He'd found Omega Dockyard a year ago and hadn't left since. He kept his head down, hammered out the dents in second-hand engine parts, and tried to stay on the good side of Nolan, the station's manager. Brick spent most of his time in Bay 17, a wide workshop that smelled of burnt metal and hydraulic fluid. The overhead lights flickered whenever the station's power output dipped, which happened often enough to be an annoyance. He would work, sleeves rolled up and arms covered in grime, on everything from decrepit cargo shuttles to battered personal cruisers that had barely survived run-ins with space debris. Sometimes he felt proud of what he did, restoring life to vessels that might otherwise be scrapped. Other times he felt like he was just slapping bandages on sinking ships. But either way, it was a paycheck. Rumors circulated one morning that a new vessel was coming in, something fancy. Brick only caught snippets. Apparently the ship was heavily damaged, but the owner was rumored to be loaded with credits. Some said the pilot was a reclusive heiress. Others claimed she was an arms dealer. When Brick heard, he snorted at the wild speculations. People on Omega loved to spin tall tales. A few hours later, Nolan himself strolled into Bay 17. His worn jumpsuit was zipped halfway up, revealing an undershirt spotted with lubricants. Nolan was a thick-set man who always carried a sour expression, as though everything around him refused to meet his standards. Still, he recognized Brick's talents, and Brick appreciated that much. "Got a special job for you," Nolan said without preamble, scratching the back of his neck. Docking Bay 03 just received a priority arrival. Word is the ship's in rough shape, but the pilot has plenty of funds. "I want you on it." Brick set down his hydro spanner and narrowed his eyes. "Plenty of funds? That's good news, I guess." Surprised they came here, though, if they can afford top-of-the-line repairs. "Sure as hell beats me," Nolan said. "But we're not complaining, are we? Do a good job. Maybe they throw extra credits our way. God knows we need them." Brick wiped the sweat from his forehead. The station had recurring issues with climate control, so even though they were in space, the interior sometimes felt like a hot summer in the tropics. "All right," he said. "Should I go check it now?" "Right now," Nolan answered. "Pilot's waiting." Brick brushed himself off and headed out. He made his way through a labyrinth of passages, each one lined with flickering overhead panels. He passed a few of his co-workers, who gave him curt nods. Some didn't like how often Nolan gave him the bigger jobs, but Brick rarely gloated. He just accepted that he was good at what he did. Docking Bay 03 was marginally cleaner than the other bays, with fresh lights installed to impress the occasional VIP visitor. When Brick entered, he saw a sleek but badly scorched mid-size ship resting on the platform. The hull had dark streaks. One engine pylon was crumpled like foil, and the ventral plating near the cargo hold was missing entire sections. Near the open ramp stood a woman who radiated a calm presence. Her posture was straight, her arms folded neatly across her chest, and she seemed to be examining the hull damage. As Brick approached, she turned to face him. She had an otherworldly elegance, though her attire was plain. A dark jumpsuit, sturdy boots, gloves with the fingertips cut off. "Hello," Brick said, lifting a hand in greeting. "I'm Brick Harding, station mechanic. Nolan asked me to come take a look at your vessel." She nodded. "I'm Ria." Her voice was measured, polite. She paused, and her dark eyes took him in. Thank you for coming so quickly. Brick gestured to the gashes on the ship's exterior. Looks pretty banged up, he said. Must have been quite an impact. You could say that. Her tone was neutral, neither bragging nor evasive. It took fire in a restricted zone, and, well, I had to make a quick exit. I think the engine was partially compromised. Brick crouched near a blackened section of plating, running his gloved hand over the scorched metal. Engine, NAV system, probably more. We might need a full diagnostic, he said. She nodded again. Do whatever is necessary. Time is a factor, but so is quality. I don't mind paying for good work. That statement alone set Brick's nerves at ease, though it also made him wonder. Most folks who came out to Omega wanted cheap and quick fixes. But here was someone who actually valued quality. He felt a glimmer of professional pride. I'll do a thorough job, he promised. If you give me permission to open up the panels, I can get a sense of how extensive the damage is. She stepped aside, motioning for him to proceed. Please, let me know if you need anything. Brick took that as a sign to get going. He climbed the ramp into the ship. Inside, it smelled of singed electronics and melted wiring. He tested the lights in the corridor, which flickered weakly. The interior was unadorned, everything streamlined, more functional than decorative. He suspected this was not some casual pleasure cruiser. He made his way to the engine room, passing a small living compartment that had few personal items. A duffel bag, a data terminal on a fold-down desk, and a single bunk with a gray blanket. If Rhea was indeed a VIP, she kept her ship Spartan. No trophies, no plush carpets, no fancy entertainment modules. In the engine room, he popped open a hatch. The core was dark, the protective casing dented. He tapped a few keys on a handheld device, scanning for residual heat or energy spikes. The readings came back grim. Half the conduits were blown, and the ones that remained were near meltdown. Damn, he muttered, stepping back. This thing was close to catastrophic failure. He retraced his steps to find Rhea standing near the cockpit, her hand brushing a console as though she was gently coaxing it to work. Your engine core is shot, Brick said plainly. I'm worried about your navigational system, too. The logs might be corrupted. Let's see. He tapped a few commands on the cockpit terminal, though it refused to cooperate. Rhea listened in silence, then responded, We can replace whatever we need. I just need it working properly. Soon. Brick glanced sideways at her. All right, I'm going to have to haul in some replacement parts. We've got a few spares on the station, but for specialized stuff, we might need to contact suppliers in the next sector. Might take a day or two for them to arrive. She gave a tiny nod, her expression revealing no impatience. Do it, but keep it discreet, please. I prefer not to advertise what kind of repairs my ship requires. He frowned slightly. Sure, this is Omega Dockyard. We're used to discretion. With that, Brick gathered his tools. He started running more scans, making a list of parts needed. Rhea hovered close by, occasionally asking technical questions that he found surprisingly astute. At first, he thought maybe she was just curious, but her knowledge of engine schematics hinted at some deeper familiarity with starship design. Still, he didn't pry. Customers came from all walks of life. Later that day, Brick found Nolan in the cramped station office. Stacks of data pads covered the old metal desk, and the overhead fan squeaked. Nolan was pacing anxiously. What's the verdict? He asked as Brick entered. Ship's a mess, Brick replied. Needs a new coil assembly, probably an entire sublight thruster mount. Plus, the NAV system got corrupted, so we need software patches. But she's got the money. Nolan exhaled, though he looked troubled. That's good news. We need the credit infusion. We're on the verge, Brick. On the verge of what? Nolan sank into his chair. You heard about Starlight Heavy Industries? Brick stiffened. I've heard bits. They're snapping up small stations, turning them into automated docks or shutting them down. Yeah, they made an offer to buy Omega Dockyard last month. I'm holding out, but they're sending a team soon for evaluation. If we don't prove our worth, they'll pressure us to sell, or they'll starve us of any supply contracts. Then we'll either be out of jobs or working for them under worse conditions. Brick ground his teeth, recalling how many times big corporations had forced him to relocate. Figures. Well, Let's hope this job with Rhea goes well. Maybe it'll buy us some goodwill. That's the idea, Nolan muttered. Brick left the office, his mood weighed down by the news. Starlight was notorious for steamrolling independent operations. He'd seen it happen on mining outposts, on other repair stations. They came in with promises of modernization, only to gut local management and push out the long-time workers. That evening, he returned to Rhea's ship to finish initial diagnostics. She was there, tinkering with a small console that displayed a flickering readout of the jump drive. Brick set down his tool case. Long day, he said. I've got the basic list of replacements we'll need. She looked over, eyes reflecting the dim light. I can help cover any immediate cost for the parts. Do you have a direct line to a supplier? Sort of, he replied, shrugging. We usually go through station channels, but they've got limited stock. For specialized stuff, I'll have to contact private sellers. It can be expensive. Rhea glanced at a data pad on the console. Show me the details. Brick handed her a second device that itemized the needed parts. Next to each part was an estimated cost. Some were painfully high. Rhea studied it in silence, then pressed her thumb to the screen. Purchased, she said. I've got an account that should cover it. Brick blinked. Wait, that's a big chunk of credits. Are you sure? She offered a small smile. I wouldn't have asked for quality if I couldn't pay for it. Do you mind if I continue looking around the ship while you wait for these deliveries? No problem, he said, though he felt a twinge of curiosity about how she had such deep pockets. He figured he shouldn't pester her. They worked in parallel, occasionally exchanging observations. He found it oddly comfortable. Rhea was quiet but not aloof, and her remarks about engineering were consistently well-informed. When Brick asked, "Where do you pick up your knowledge?" she answered only, "From various places." Days passed in this routine. Brick replaced battered wires, installed new thruster components, tested the stabilizers. The orders Rhea had placed arrived quickly, faster than Brick expected for an out-of-the-way station. It was as though her account had some priority status that made suppliers jump. He asked Nolan if that was normal, and Nolan just scratched his head. No, but if she's got that kind of influence, we're lucky. Meanwhile, talk of Starlight Heavy Industries grew louder. Multiple workers confided in Brick that a corporate delegation would arrive soon to decide Omega Dockyard's fate. Some co-workers gave Brick attitude, claiming he was the golden boy because he always got the high-paying gigs. He ignored them. If Rhea's repair job could keep the station afloat, so be it. At one point, Rhea joined Brick near the open hull access of her ship as he replaced a cracked cooling conduit. She watched him expertly fit the new piece in place. "You have a talent," she said. "Very few mechanics I've met are so thorough." Brick shrugged, but couldn't hide a pleased grin. "I've been around. Learned from old-timers who taught me you can't skip steps on starship repairs. One loose bolt in a thruster assembly, and you're in a world of hurt, or floating helpless in space." She nodded. Agreed. It's refreshing to see that approach. He paused, pushing his sweaty hair aside. "Mind if I ask you something?" "Sure. How come you ended up at Omega? It's not exactly a prime destination, especially for someone with your resources." Rhea considered him for a moment. "I planned a more discreet route. I needed somewhere quiet to handle repairs. Omega's off the major shipping lanes, which suits me fine." He sensed a subtext she didn't share, but he let it go. Everyone had secrets, especially if they were traveling alone, with a high-end ship and enough money to buy half the station's stock of spare parts. Late that night, after completing a calibration on the new engine mount, Brick emerged from the ship to find Rhea standing on the docking platform, gazing out a small observation window. Through the reinforced glass, one could see the swirling stars and, far below, a faint glow of a distant planet. "You okay?" Brick asked, stepping up next to her. She gave a small nod, just admiring the view. Then she looked at him, her gaze thoughtful. "Are you happy here, Brick?" He was taken aback by the personal question. "It's not my dream, if that's what you mean. But it's a job, and it keeps me busy." "Why do you ask?" "No reason," she said softly. "I like to see how people feel about their station or their workplace." He wondered if she was just making conversation or if there was a deeper meaning. Nonetheless, he answered honestly. "I'll admit, I worry that this place might get shut down if the big guys come knocking. But I do my best to keep my head down and fix what needs fixing." She touched the window's frame. "I suppose that's sometimes all we can do." The following afternoon, Brick was rummaging through the supply closet in Bay 17 when an announcement blared on the intercom. "Attention, Omega Dockyard staff. A delegation from Starlight Heavy Industries has arrived. All department heads report to the main conference room." Brick froze, a coil in hand. He sighed, replaced the coil on a shelf, and decided to see what was happening. As he made his way there, he spotted well-dressed individuals stepping off a corporate shuttle with the Starlight emblem shining on their suits. They were all business, scanning the station's interior with dispassionate eyes. Near the conference room entrance, Brick saw Nolan fidgeting with the zipper of his jumpsuit. The manager looked tense. "Here we go," Nolan muttered. "They'll probably give us a speech about consolidation and streamlining." Brick had no desire to attend a corporate briefing, so he decided to slip away, returning to Ria's ship to continue repairs. But before he could vanish, one of the Starlight representatives, a tall man with slicked back hair, stopped him. "Mechanic," the man said brusquely. "You might need to be in this meeting." Brick frowned. "Why?" "We have to assess the station's capabilities, including maintenance operations." "So you, as I understand it, are one of the primary technicians?" "Yeah," Brick replied, trying not to roll his eyes. "I handle repairs. I was actually in the middle of a big one." The man tapped a datapad. "Yes, the so-called big project everyone's whispering about. The fancy mid-sized ship in docking Bay 03. I like to see it. It's under private contract," Brick said. "The owner wants privacy." The man smirked. "Private contract or not, we are Starlight Heavy Industries. If we acquire this facility, everything inside it is effectively under our purview. So let's not make this difficult." Brick hated the way these corporate types spoke, as if they already owned the place. But he forced himself to remain calm. "All right, I'll show you the outside. But the interior is off limits without the owner's consent." He led the Starlight man to the docking bay. A few more corporate suits trailed behind, surveying every corridor with that same clinical detachment. When they reached Bay 03, Ria's ship still had a portion of its hull plating removed, revealing the patched conduits and new thruster assemblies. The tall man, whose name turned out to be Wesley, circled around, making notes on his datapad. "This is an interesting array of parts," he commented with a raised eyebrow. "Some of these are top tier. Surprised to see them on a station like Omega." Brick shrugged. "Customer's money, customer's choice." Wesley reached for the docking ramp. "Let's take a peek inside." But Brick stepped forward, blocking his path. "No, like I said, the owner wants it private." Wesley's face darkened. "Don't be a fool. We need to evaluate the station's full operational scope. If we're going to improve things, we need to see." Suddenly, a calm voice spoke from behind them. "Is there a problem here?" They all turned to see Ria standing at the entrance, arms folded. She gave Wesley a cool look. "And who are you?" Wesley asked, sounding mildly irritated. "I'm the pilot and owner of this vessel," she said. "You do not have my permission to enter." Wesley bristled. "With all due respect, we're here on official business. We have a right to examine." She raised a hand. "Not if it infringes on my private property. Unless you have a direct order from the Planetary Council or the Galactic Trade Authority, you have no grounds to intrude." Brick watched, impressed by how calmly she asserted herself. He half expected Wesley to blow up, but the man seemed momentarily at a loss. He glanced at his colleagues, who looked uneasy. Then he cleared his throat. "Fine, we'll move along for now, but don't be surprised if we circle back." With that, the Starlight group left in a swirl of tension. Ria let out a quiet breath, then turned to Brick. "Thank you for trying to keep them out." He scratched the back of his head. "I figured you wouldn't want them poking around. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied. "I've dealt with people like that before." A day later, rumors circulated that Starlight had begun drafting formal acquisition terms for Omega Dockyard. Nolan walked around with a haunted look, complaining that the corporate bigwigs found the place inefficient. Brick heard that Starlight might lay off half the staff to cut costs. Tensions rose. Some workers lashed out at each other. While all this brewed, Brick kept working on Ria's ship. He replaced the final damaged plating on the ventral hull, reconnected the newly installed NAV systems, and spent hours debugging the software that had been scrambled by the original damage. Rhea often joined him, assisting with calibrations. Sometimes she'd mention random facts about Starship architecture, referencing advanced knowledge that made Brick wonder just how much she knew. On the third evening, as Brick was running final checks in the cockpit, Rhea slipped into the co-pilot's seat. "Thank you for the excellent work," she said after a pause. "I can see you treat every detail with care." He gave a half laugh, still watching the readout on the console. "You're welcome. Honestly, it's refreshing to have the right parts for once. Usually I'm stuck patching junk." She looked at him in a way that made him shift in his seat. There was curiosity in her gaze, something deeper than mere client service interest. "Do you know anything about Starlight Heavy Industries, Brick?" He shrugged. "A bit. They're a massive corporation that swallows up smaller outfits. I guess they started as a Starship manufacturer, then expanded to manage shipping lanes, docking stations, the whole supply chain. Now, they're apparently everywhere." She nodded. "They have a large foothold in most major systems. Some branches operate fairly, others not so much." Brick pursed his lips. "Yeah, well, from what I've seen, they usually push folks like us around." She stared at the readouts. "Hypothetically, would you want to work for them?" He blinked at her sudden question. "Me? Working for Starlight? I'd probably wind up as a cog in the machine with less freedom. Right now, at least I can choose which jobs I take." Rhea tilted her head. "What if you could make positive changes from the inside?" He let out a dry chuckle. "Someone like me? I'm just a mechanic. I'm not in a position to change corporate policy." She said nothing for a moment, then stood. "Well, you never know," she said quietly. "Sometimes one person can make a difference." The final day of repairs dawned. Brick woke up in his cramped bunk, yawning and stretching his aching muscles. He pulled on his jumpsuit, rolled his shoulders, and walked out into the corridor to grab a cup of coffee. After a quick breakfast, he headed to docking Bay 03, determined to finish Rhea's ship once and for all. He was halfway through calibrating the newly installed thruster mount when Nolan rushed into the bay. "We've got a crisis," the manager hissed. "Starlight's official delegation is here, and they're demanding to do a final inspection of the station. They also specifically asked about this ship again." Brick frowned as he tightened the thruster assembly. "Yeah, they were eyeing it before." Nolan looked rattled. "One of them told me if I don't give them access, it'll be grounds to terminate any purchase negotiations, meaning they'll just close us outright. But I have no authority to force the owner to comply. I don't know what to do." As if on cue, the tall man Wesley arrived with a pair of colleagues. "Manager," he said coldly, "we understand you have a valuable asset here. We'd like a closer look." He gestured to Rhea's ship. Nolan shot Brick a despairing glance. Brick could only stand there, the wrench still in his hand. Wesley and his associates marched closer to the ramp, ignoring any protests. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them. "You won't need to board that ship." All heads turned. Rhea walked forward, posture composed, an air of authority that Brick had never quite seen before. She held out a small data rod. "Would you like to see the documentation?" Wesley sneered. "And who are you again?" This time, I like a real answer. Rhea inserted the data rod into a handheld projector. A holographic screen popped up, displaying a series of official documents. Brick, Nolan, and everyone else present craned to see. The documents bore the emblem of Starlight Heavy Industries. Wesley's smug face paled as he read them. "That can't be," he stammered. Rhea's voice remained calm. "You'll find, Mr. Wesley, that I am Rhea M. Callis, principal shareholder and board member of Starlight Heavy Industries. Some call me the reclusive owner, though, as you see, I've kept a low profile. I believe that gives me authority over certain so-called acquisitions, including this one." The oxygen seemed to vanish from the docking bay. Nolan's mouth hung open. Brick felt his heart hammering in his chest. Rhea? A principal shareholder? Possibly the controlling interest in the company that was about to swallow Omega Dockyard? Wesley swallowed. "But we were told MS. Callis was on the outer rim, or that she never left the headquarters, or—" Rhea eyed him icily. "Yes. Well, your information was incomplete. Now, regarding your attempt to forcibly board my personal vessel, that is in direct violation of Protocol 7.12. I think you're aware that failing to respect a board member's property is grounds for immediate disciplinary review, if not termination. Wesley's colleagues stepped back, whispering among themselves, evidently alarmed. Wesley tried to salvage the situation. MS. Callus, Rhea, I didn't know. We were told to evaluate Omega Dockyard's viability as part of the expansion initiative, and Rhea lifted a hand. I'm sure you followed standard procedure. But let me be clear. If you think I'd allow you to strong-arm the manager here, or any of the staff, you are mistaken. I've had my eye on Omega Dockyard for some time. Nolan's eyes were practically bugging out of his head. You have. Rhea nodded calmly. I prefer to see how independent stations operate without the usual corporate bureaucracy interfering, which is why I came here in person, incognito. She turned her gaze on Wesley. The question is, have you found anything truly inefficient or worth scrapping? Because from my perspective, I see capable workers, resourceful management, and an outstanding mechanic who managed to repair my ship to near-perfect condition in record time. Brick felt his cheeks grow warm. He tried not to show his surprise. Wesley, faced with the revelation of Rhea's identity, looked like he was swallowing a large lemon. Well, the station's definitely old. It might need modernization to increase throughput. But if you, as a shareholder, want to keep it operating, that's your right. Rhea nodded curtly. Correct. I will not approve a complete shutdown or a forced eviction of staff. Instead, we will be investing in an upgrade program that suits the current workforce. If that is unsatisfactory, you may submit your resignation to the board. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Nolan gave Brick a wide-eyed stare, as if to say, "Are we dreaming?" Meanwhile, Wesley and his entourage practically cowered. They understood that all their power plays to push for a cheap acquisition had just been upended. Rhea took a slow breath. Now, I suggest you conclude your inspection with a proper report. Include my personal recommendation to maintain Omega Dockyard as an active repair station. After you file it, you're free to leave. Wesley nodded, his face tight. He collected his subordinates, and they strode away in a much more subdued fashion than when they'd arrived. Nolan almost broke into a run to stand in front of Rhea. MS. Callus, I don't know what to say. You just saved us. If there's anything I can do. She raised a hand. No thanks needed. Just keep doing your job. I'll have my corporate liaison contact you regarding the station's modernization, staff benefits, that sort of thing. Nolan looked as if he might pass out from relief. Of course. Absolutely. With that, he left, presumably to share the miraculous news with the rest of the station. Brick stood there, feeling like a statue. So, Rhea Callus, he managed, voice cracking slightly. You're the big boss, basically. She turned to face him. Her expression gentled. I apologize for the deception, but I needed a clear view of how things run here, how the staff behaves without corporate pressure or special treatment. That's why I kept my identity hidden. I needed to see who I could trust, especially after hearing rumors of some unscrupulous expansions. He nodded slowly, trying to process it all. It's a lot to take in. She offered a slight smile. I'm sure it is, but I meant what I said. Your work was outstanding. I knew from the day I arrived that you were skilled, but I wanted to see how you handled challenges under station conditions. Brick found himself chuckling softly, more out of disbelief than humor. Well, I guess I didn't do too badly, then, if you're praising me. They strolled back toward her ship. Brick felt a strange mix of relief and embarrassment. He recalled all the times he'd muttered about Starlight being some corporate beast. She had heard it all, apparently, but she hadn't held it against him. When they reached the base of the ramp, Rhea paused. Are the final repairs complete? Yeah, Brick said. Just need to run a final test flight. Make sure everything's stable under load. Her eyes lit with a hint of excitement. Let's do it. Now, we'll put the naysayers to rest. He hesitated, scanning the docking bay. All right, guess we can do an undock and short hop. Let me just file a flight plan with the station. She nodded. I'll inform Nolan. Within 20 minutes, the station's automated system granted them permission for a test flight. Brick settled into the pilot's seat. Rhea insisted, though it was her ship. She took the co-pilot's seat and guided him through the startup sequence. The new engine core hummed smoothly. He felt a surge of pride at hearing that perfectly balanced hum. They eased out of the docking clamp, the station receding behind them. The blackness of space opened before them, speckled with distant stars. Brick tested the thrusters, running a series of maneuvers. It handled beautifully. The ship responded to every input like a well-tuned instrument. Ria's voice was calm and satisfied. Excellent acceleration. Stabilizers are holding at 97%. That's even better than I expected. Brick's grin stretched wide. You had the best parts, and a decent mechanic, I guess. She let out a quiet laugh. Yes, I did. After an hour of successful testing, both sublight speeds and a short jump simulation, Brick guided the ship back to Omega Dockyard. The redocking went smoothly, and he powered down with a sense of accomplishment. When they emerged from the vessel, a small crowd had gathered, including Nolan and a few curious onlookers who'd heard rumors of the major plot twist. Nolan's face lit up. So, everything check out? Ria nodded. Perfectly. Bricks. Work is top-notch, as I suspected. A scattered burst of applause came from some station workers, and Brick felt his cheeks burn. He wasn't used to an audience. That night, the tension that had blanketed Omega Dockyard for weeks finally lifted. Workers who had feared losing their jobs were celebrating. Nolan uncorked some cheap, fizzy beverage that passed for champagne in the station cafeteria, handing out plastic cups to everyone. Even though the station was still the same, somewhat run-down place, the promise of corporate support without mass layoffs sparked hope. Brick ended up sitting at a corner table, sipping the beverage that tasted like sweet, carbonated cough syrup. He looked around, seeing the relief and joy on people's faces. The place he'd called home for the last year, which had always struggled, now had a future. Ria appeared and quietly took a seat across from him. No one else seemed to notice her slip into the spot. Her manner was still calm, but now there was a warmth in her eyes. Looks like they're enjoying themselves. Can't blame them, Brick said, swirling the drink in his cup. A day ago, they thought they'd be out of a job. She nodded. Fortunately, that won't happen now. She watched him for a few moments, then leaned forward. I want to offer you something. He raised an eyebrow. Me? She took a small data card from an inner pocket. Starlight has multiple R&D divisions scattered across the galaxy, each focusing on specialized shipbuilding, propulsion research, advanced robotics, you name it. I'd like you to join one of our advanced engineering teams. You have skill, dedication, and you see the details that matter. His mind reeled. I'm not sure. I've never done R&D. I'm usually just patching up old ships. And, I've spent my life avoiding big corporations. She tilted her head, expression gentle. Starlight might be huge, but that also means there are corners within the company where people can affect change. We're not all like Wesley, and there's an urgent need for grounded, practical engineers. People who actually understand how these ships work in real environments, not just on paper. Brick glanced around the cafeteria, noticing a group of co-workers who no longer seemed resentful of him. I'd be leaving Omega, wouldn't I? Potentially, she said. Or you could remain stationed here for a while, as part of a transition program. My point is, we'd ensure you have the resources you need to keep improving. I want you to realize your full potential. He felt a pang of doubt. I'm just a mechanic, Ria. You're not just anything, she cut in gently. I've watched you solve problems with a resourcefulness that some of our top lab engineers lack. If you want to stay here, fine, but I'd love to have you on board in a bigger capacity. He nodded slowly, swallowing. All right, let me think about it. Take your time, she agreed. There's no rush. You've done plenty already. They shared a brief smile before she stood, letting him mull over her words. The night wore on, and people drifted off to rest. Brick eventually crawled into his bunk, the entire day replaying in his mind. Ria's dramatic reveal, the test flight, her offer. He wondered if he was still dreaming. Morning came too soon. Brick woke up groggy, shuffled to a station kiosk for coffee, then stopped by Bay 03 out of habit. He found Ria inside her ship, double-checking the newly installed systems, as though ensuring every cable was properly seated. Shouldn't you be, celebrating your corporate coup? He joked. She turned, smiling faintly. Celebration isn't really my style. Besides, I want to confirm everything's perfect for the next journey. The life support readout was flickering. He stepped closer to see. Might just be a loose sensor. He popped open the panel, tightened a connection. The flicker vanished. Done. She pressed a few keys, verifying the fix. Thank you. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to say. Finally, Brick cleared his throat. So do you head out soon? She set her data pad aside. In a day or two. I need to finalize some details with Nolan about station improvements and handle a few corporate transmissions. Then yes, I'll move on. I have a lot to attend to. Right? He said, feeling an unexpected twinge of regret. She stepped closer, folding her arms. When you finish any tasks you have left here, consider my offer. I'll leave the job details with you. If you decide to join, you'll have a place on my engineering team, where you can propose something else that suits your interests. He nodded. I appreciate it. I do. Rhea studied him for a moment. You strike me as someone who's never quite had the chance to show what he can do. You have talent and, dare I say, heart. It would be a shame if you stayed hidden away, patching up old ships forever, unless that's truly what you want. His mind flicked through memories of drifting from Station 2. Station, never stable, always overshadowed by corporate expansions. Perhaps here was an unexpected chance to use that same corporate structure to do something better. By the end of that day, the big tension that had gripped Omega was replaced by subdued optimism. Word spread that MS Callus, the real power behind Starlight, was investing in the station. Some of the more unscrupulous middle managers in Wesley's entourage had found themselves packing up, no longer able to push their shady deals. Workers were already seeing improved supply lines for parts, bigger monthly budgets, and a promise of better living quarters. Brick took on a few smaller repair jobs, mostly routine maintenance. He found his mind wandering, replaying Rhea's words. The question loomed, should he remain at Omega or step out of his comfort zone and join her? That night, in the corridor leading to the cargo hold, Brick overheard a couple of newly arrived staff from Starlight discussing station upgrades. They spoke of better power distribution nodes, refined climate control, perhaps even an entertainment dome to boost morale. Brick realized how different everything could become if these improvements were real. He bumped into Rhea near the administrative office. She'd come out after a lengthy meeting with Nolan. All settled, he asked. She nodded, glancing at a data pad. I've allocated the initial funds for repairs to station infrastructure. Nolan's on board with the plan. Actually, I think he's overjoyed. Brick smiled. That's good. Feels like a load's been taken off his shoulders. Rhea tapped on her data pad, then looked up. I'll be departing tomorrow. I want to give you something before I go. She handed him a thin silver card, engraved with the Starlight emblem. It's an open pass to the R&D facility in the Andorra system, as well as a personal code you can use to contact me directly. You can also use it for near unlimited access to parts for your projects, within reason. He turned it over in his hands. This is wow. She watched him, her expression earnest. I respect that you might want to stay here. But if you ever want more, or want to design better starship systems, or help fix the oversights that get people killed in poorly built vessels, I'll be waiting. His throat felt tight. I can't tell you how surreal this all is. Yesterday, I was just a guy worried about my next paycheck. Now, the boss of a galactic corporation is telling me I can basically do anything. She touched his arm lightly. Your skill deserves it, Brick. They parted ways for the evening, each retreating to their quarters. Brick laid in his bunk, staring at the silver card. He couldn't sleep. He remembered the feeling of the newly repaired thrusters, the hum of the engine that responded to every subtle touch. That was real engineering, the kind that excited him. The next morning, Rhea prepared her ship for departure. Brick came by to see her off, standing near the docking bay as the final cargo clamp was released. A small crowd had gathered, some station workers waving politely, a few others watching curiously. Rhea stepped out for a moment, greeting those present. Nolan bowed his head respectfully, which was a strange sight. Brick gave her a half-smile. Guess this is goodbye for now. She nodded. Yes, for now. She extended a hand, and Brick clasped it. Thank you again. Thank you, he replied quietly. for saving Omega and, well, for trusting me with your ship." She headed up the ramp, and the doors sealed. Moments later, the engines ignited, and the ship lifted off the bay floor with a smooth grace that Brick found gratifying. He watched as it eased out of the pressurized atmosphere into open space, then accelerated away. For several minutes, he simply stood there, reflecting. A few workers patted his back, saying, "Nice job on that project, Brick. You practically got the boss's approval." He managed a laugh, though inside he was wrestling with the knowledge that he might not stay on Omega forever. Days turned into a couple of weeks. The station bustled with new energy. Crews arrived from Starlight, installing better lighting, reinforcing whole sections that had rusted. The cafeteria began offering more than stale protein bars. People joked that next they'd get a sports simulator or a mini greenhouse. Through it all, Brick continued to do what he did best: fix ships. Yet something felt different. He wasn't just patching junk. Now he had top-grade parts at his disposal, courtesy of RIA's new policies. He repaired cargo haulers that soared away with renewed efficiency. He restored a drifting merchant's vessel so perfectly that the merchant offered him triple the usual fee. Brick politely refused the excess pay, settling on standard rates. Nolan teased him for it, calling him the honest mechanic, but Brick didn't want to exploit anyone. One morning, a supply drone arrived with a shipment of cutting-edge engine coils, exactly the type Brick had once dreamed of using, but could never afford. The invoice read, "Authorized by R.M. Gullis." Brick felt a pang in his chest. She was still pulling strings to help him do better work, even from afar. Then came a day when he was calibrating thrusters on a routine shuttle, and he realized his hands were doing the work mechanically while his mind wandered to the possibility of building something new, something that took advantage of all the knowledge he'd accumulated from years of field repairs. If he joined that R&D team, maybe he could design an engine that wouldn't break down after a single micrometeorite strike. Maybe he could develop navigation software that wouldn't need endless patches. He finished the job, set down his tools, and stared at the silver card Rhea had given him. He'd kept in his pocket every day since she left. He'd occasionally rub his thumb over its engraved surface. Nolan passed by, noticing Brick's faraway look. "You all right?" Brick exhaled. "Yeah, just thinking." The manager eyed the silver card. "Ah, thinking about that, huh?" Brick nodded. "I love Omega, and I appreciate everything that's happened. But maybe my path lies somewhere else. Or maybe I can do more for this place if I learn new skills from the inside." Nolan patted his shoulder. "If you go, I'll miss you, but I won't hold you back. Hell, if you end up in a position of power at Starlight, maybe you can keep me employed for a few more years." He laughed. Brick managed a grin. "We'll see." That evening, Brick made his decision. He returned to his bunk, typed a brief message into a communicator that was keyed to Rhea's direct line. He said he was ready to take her up on the offer. A part of him trembled with nerves as he hit send. 3 days later, a Starlight transport arrived, specifically requesting Brick Harding. He packed his few belongings, a small toolbox, a duffel bag of clothes, and some personal mementos. He said farewells to his co-workers, who teased him about going corporate, but they also congratulated him, insisting that if anyone deserved the opportunity, it was him. Nolan clapped him on the back and said, "Don't be a stranger." Brick boarded the transport, heart pounding. It was a sleek vessel with the Starlight emblem on the hull. Inside, a polite attendant welcomed him, leading him to a comfortable seat. Soon, the engines hummed to life, and Omega Dockyard shrank behind them. He felt a pang of nostalgia, but he also felt the thrill of stepping into something bigger. During the journey, Brick stared out a side window, watching the stars blur into streaks as they jumped to FTL. For so long, he'd been drifting from one station to another, never with a real plan. Now he had the chance not just to fix ships, but to build them, to design new solutions. And it was thanks to Rhea Callis, the mysterious pilot turned corporate magnate. When the transport arrived at a Starlight facility in the Andorra system, Brick was greeted by a project manager who showed him around a bustling workshop filled with advanced tech. Rows of half-built prototypes lined the floor. Engineers scurried about, engrossed in tasks far more complex than routine maintenance. Brick felt a surge of excitement, mixed with intimidation. He was given a small office, along with a personal lab bench. On his desk lay a note with Ria's initials, welcoming him. The note read simply, "I'm glad you decided to join us. Your input will be invaluable. Erka." That first week was a whirlwind of orientation, meeting fellow engineers, diving into advanced starship design software. Brick realized how naive he'd been to think he'd just step in and know everything. He had a learning curve, but he attacked it with the same thoroughness he'd always shown with repairs. One night, while analyzing thruster efficiency charts, he received a direct comm request from Ria. He accepted, and her image appeared on a small hollow screen. She looked the same, poised, calm, yet with a hint of warmth in her dark eyes. "I see you're settling in," she said, glancing at the readouts on her end. "Trying to," Brick replied. "It's a lot, but I'm enjoying it." She gave him a half-smile. "I'm pleased to hear that. If you need help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You have a unique perspective. I want to see how your experiences with real-field repairs can inform our theoretical designs." He nodded, feeling a knot of gratitude in his chest. "Thank you, Ria. This is more than I ever thought I'd get." "Just do what you do best," she said softly. "Fix things. Make them better. That's all I ask." They ended the call, and Brick sat there for a moment, letting the new reality wash over him. No longer was he merely the man who hammered bent metal at a dusty docking station. He was part of something bigger, with the direct support of the company's hidden power broker. Weeks turned to months. Brick found himself engrossed in designing a new class of sublight thrusters that integrated partial jump technology for short-range teleportation, a concept that had been shelved by other engineers due to complexities. But Brick, with his knowledge of how thrusters failed in real conditions, was able to propose practical solutions. He collaborated with teams from different corners of Starlight, each specialized in a piece of the puzzle. They tested prototypes in vacuum chambers, subjected them to simulated meteor strikes, and hammered out every flaw. Each time Brick recognized a problem, he tackled it with the same meticulous care he once applied to battered starships. In the quiet nights, he sometimes recalled the day he first met Ria on Omega Dockyard, how he'd assumed she was just another pilot in need of repairs. Now he understood that she had planned her incognito mission precisely to see the station for herself, and he'd ended up her accidental ally. He occasionally received messages from Nolan, describing how Omega Dockyard had blossomed. They had new living quarters, better working conditions, and job security that had once been a distant dream. Nolan half-joked that Brick had become the station's hero. That always made Brick shake his head with a grin. He never set out to be anyone's hero, just a reliable mechanic. As for Ria, she visited Andora's R&D facility every few weeks, checking on progress. Their interactions shifted from formal to friendly, sometimes sharing a laugh over coffee in the sterile white cafeteria. She had an understated wit, and she'd tease him about his initial disbelief. One evening, after a successful test of a new thruster prototype, the two of them walked side by side down a corridor that overlooked a massive docking bay. Engineers scurried around a half-built starship, and the hum of machinery provided a steady backdrop. Ria glanced at Brick. "Do you miss patching up old wrecks on Omega?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sometimes, but I'm glad I took this step." He stared at the starship below, a state-of-the-art design that might soon revolutionize short-distance travel. "I never thought I'd have a hand in building something like that." She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "It's amazing what can happen when the right people find each other at the right time." He felt a subtle warmth in her words and gave her a sidelong look. "So you're not just a reclusive owner. You're out here, actually guiding the company." "What?" She paused, leaning on the corridor railing. "Because I believe in shaping our future rather than just profiting from it. My father started Starlight from a small workshop decades ago. I grew up around engines and prototypes. When it got too big, too corporate, I pulled back, trying to figure out how to steer it the right way. I realized I needed people like you, people who remember that everything we build for others to use. And if we do it wrong, people can die, or get stranded on some lonely station. Brick's eyes flickered with understanding. So that's why you visited Omega, to see if it was worth saving. She gave him a nod. Yes, and I found it was not just the station, but the people there, including you. They stood quietly for a moment, the corridor bustling around them. In that shared silence, they understood the unspoken. Their meeting had been a chance encounter that changed both their lives, each in a different way. Over the subsequent months, Brick fully integrated into the R&D division. He overcame his initial intimidation, even leading a small team of engineers who tested new hull alloys. The day they successfully completed an endurance trial with 0 catastrophic failures, he allowed himself a rare moment of self-congratulation. Back at Omega Dockyard, the improvements continued. Brick visited occasionally, courtesy of the new jump lane Starlight established. On each visit, he'd see how the station had grown busier, more vibrant, a shining example of how a corporate upgrade didn't have to mean a hostile takeover. Workers recognized him, greeted him warmly, sharing tales of how their families now had better living conditions. When he returned to Andorra after one such visit, Ria called him into a meeting. She was looking over schematic updates, but set them aside when he arrived. "I've got another proposition for you," she said without preamble. He half laughed. "You keep giving me propositions. Should I be worried?" She smirked. "Nothing sinister, I promise. We're launching a specialized think tank to innovate core starship systems. Engine, navigation, hull, life support, everything from top to bottom. I want you to head up the engine division." His mouth went dry. "Head up? As in, run it?" "Yes. I know you can do it. You've already proven your leadership in smaller project teams. This would just be official." He swallowed. "That's a huge responsibility." Ria nodded. "It is. And you won't be alone. You'll have a staff, resources, the freedom to recruit more. Experts if needed." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "But I won't force you. If you prefer staying as a hands-on mechanic, say the word. I just believe you can make a bigger impact if you guide the process." He looked at the screen behind her, images of starships, component diagrams, lines of data. It struck him that his entire life had been about quietly fixing what was broken, never aspiring to more. Now, the chance to shape the future of starship design was literally in front of him. "Okay," he said at length. "I'm in. I'll do it." Her smile spread. "I'm glad to hear that." They ended up speaking for another hour about the logistics, the team structure, possible leads on advanced propulsion physicists. For Brick, it was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. As he walked out of her office, he recalled how this entire journey started. A battered ship limping into a shabby station, a quiet pilot who turned out to be the owner of a megacorporation, and a human mechanic with no idea how drastically his life was about to change. Sometimes, fate had a way of steering people to exactly where they needed to be, like a well-repaired engine thruster guiding a ship through the darkness of space toward a new horizon.